Hi, everybody. Welcome. Hope you are enjoying the conference. It's really great to be in front of a local crowd, and this is a terrific turnout. I'm very happy to be presenting with Joe. He's going to be smart, and I'm going to be the smart ass, okay? Joe knows a hell of a lot about Active Directory. It's a case of what he's forgotten is more than what most of us will probably learn in a lifetime. And I'm going to share more or less my high-level overview and experiences with what can go wrong when you don't do things right with Active Directory. So that's why I'm here. That's why Joe's here.
All right. Okay. Ready?
Ready.
Okay. Always the standard legal disclaimer. We won't talk about that anymore. All right. Let's get started.
Okay. Great. Okay, so this works. All right. So you think you know Active Directory, right? Anybody who's had to work with it knows you can never know enough about this. It is a lifelong learning experience, especially when you have to learn hard lessons. I've currently witnessed some pretty ugly scenarios involving what goes wrong with Active Directory. You could call it when bad things happen to good Active Directory, except that it wasn't good. It's in the configuration. So we want to talk about how to get you set up in 25 minutes or less with the basics so that when you leave here today, you'll have an appreciation for what it is you should know, do not really know, and what you could do about it when you get back to your own configuration to improve upon that. We want to set you up for success. There's a lot of stories out there about default, but we're going to give you examples layer by layer of how to do this well. Not perfectly. It's always going to be a learning experience. You're always going to need to build on your knowledge and stay on top of things. But we will show you the stuff that you may very well have been missing through this whole process. Okay.
Next. There you go.
All right. So there you go. That's Active Directory, right? Essentially, this is the heart of Active Directory. And I'm going to give you one lesson. Think of when you were a kid and you had peas and potatoes, corn, meat, and gravy on your plate. Nothing touched, right? That's in the center of your plate. Nothing should touch that. That is what you are protecting. That's the core. Those are your central domain controllers. That is the key repository. Active Directory, what it is a repository of authentication and authorization information. And as you know, no matter what size or scale that you're managing, it's an enormous amount of information that is coming in there. And you have to be the gatekeeper of that. And it starts with the core. So you're going to put a perimeter, a safety zone around this as you layer out to make sure that nothing ever really gets to speak directly to Active Directory.
Ready?
Let me think if there's anything else I want to add. Okay, yeah, we're good.
All right.
Okay. Domain admin for everybody, for you and you and you, for all of us, right? Is this your reality? Oh my God. Because everybody wants domain admin, right? Because it just makes life easier. Because the execs want it, because the guys in marketing need it. Everybody has a reason why they need to have domain admin. We want to do this. We want to be able to be nimble, and it suits the business, and we're business profit driven, and we want to be agile. There's so many reasons around it, and there's so many reasons why we do not want to do this. I'm sorry. You are not all special snowflakes. So we're going to just say no. We have to. You cannot have domain admin. You cannot be signing on with your domain admin credentials to do stuff. That's how you get pwned. But People keep forgetting that, and it keeps happening. So this is where we teach you, when you start at the very beginning with that little center triangle on your plate and you segregate it from everything else, it's much easier to build in the ability to say no. And you have to. So we're going to scale it back because there's another factor around Active Directory. It is not secure out of the box. There's a lot of default stuff. There's a lot of settings. And the bottom line is, your success with Active Directory and security is only going to be as good as the investment of time that you put in to managing and manipulating the configurations. It can be an amazing tool, but only if you take the time to learn what you can set up about it and what you have to stay on top of. Case in point, if you have somebody who goes after your systems, in a werewolf attack, not that this has ever happened, and they wipe out all of your drives because they are really mad because you canned them and you were not keeping good logs and your backups are shit, you have a problem. And then when you try to turn the services back on, you've re-enabled all the settings, all the default settings. And the werewolf was actually waiting for you to do that because he knew you weren't going to go back and can't close it down using GPO. So he got back in again, and he took everything away that you actually managed to restore. This is why you want to pay attention and understand where the default settings are, what you need to lock down, which is pretty much everything from the beginning, and stay on top of it.
Okay, so let's talk about the starting point. Active Directory. The first sort of security consideration that you need to deal with your domain controllers is the physical security side. Treat your domain controllers, like what they are, one of the keys to the kingdom, right? Make sure that they're encrypted. If you're using virtual machines, make sure that the virtual machine images are isolated from the rest of the environment and heavily audited. Make sure that all your backups of all your domain controllers are also backed up and significantly controlled. If you have an image of a domain controller, you have the domain. Redundancy is also a very key consideration. Make sure that you diversify your domain controllers. Typically, you want at least a minimum of two different networks, or at least three different networks, 3 different domain controllers in 2 geographic locations, okay? Because you want to avoid the inverted pyramid of pain. Very important lesson learned, by the way. Single disk controller gone, all domain controllers down. Business continuity is also one of the very, very, very fundamental consideration that you need to take into consideration up front. Okay, machine level backup and recovery, but you also need object level backup and recovery within the context of your domain. It's vitally important that you can refer back to what the value or attribute of an object was 2 weeks ago. And attacks are unavoidable. Before even deploying your Active Directory, have a plan in place, or starting as part of your design and your build, make sure you have a plan as to how to recover it when it is compromised. Reduce the footprint. Active Directory, by default, there's a lot of ports. It's wide open. It has a lot of problems. Leverage VLANs, isolate the domain controllers from other domain members. Group like things with like security postures together. Consider using read-only domain controllers. It's a fundamental design consideration for dealing with untrusted or less trusted domain members. Limit your RODCs themselves if you choose to use them. You can have domain controllers that don't contain your domain admin type credentials, which is vitally important. When it does get hacked, that's the one that's exposed, and it's not exposing your core credentials. And then monitor. Monitoring is very important. Log everything from your domain controllers. Make sure that you're analyzing it on an ongoing basis. There are many tools in the space that can help you with that if you don't have your own SIM today. But one of the also critical systems. One of the fundamental things that Windows has out of the box is the ability to do WEC, which is a Windows event log collection for your non-critical domain critical machines in your domain. It might be a bridge that you can consider. And ATA. I have yet to see a good SIM that does pass the hash detection. ATA is a great tool that's part of the Microsoft framework that can help you identify pass the hash attacks in your environment. And up front, before you get too far, take some considerations in terms of your forest, domain, and site definitions. All right, I'm going to, in the interest of time, we talked a little, I mentioned the fact that we had RODCs, or I suggest RODCs. RODCs are great because they can limit the scope of your attack surface that you're presenting from your end users. It does have some limitations, all which can be overcome easily. You don't necessarily join the domain in the same way. You go through an offline domain join process. You can still change your password. There are other sort of limitations of RODCs. Well, some consider them limitations, others don't, like BitLocker. All right, you can't write the BitLocker key to the machine, so you have to deploy MBAM if you're using RODCs. However, one of the awesome things that MBAM gives you is reporting capabilities. You know every device and what its status of encryption is. And that's just phenomenal when you're having to deal with incidences of lost laptops. You can provably say that that was encrypted. So I don't consider it so much of a limitation as a benefit. Privileged management, I guess, is the next topic we should talk about. Don't manage Active Directory from machines that you don't dedicate and manage and treat as a management platform. Time and time again, I see domains being compromised because they're managing Active Directory from their desktops and they're using that to do all their web surfing and everything else. All right. Sure.
Can you explain what acronyms are? Can you read them the first time? Like, what is RODCs?
A read-only domain controller. Oh, okay. Sorry. Thank you. I will do that. All right. All right. Which? Oh, okay. I'm going to get there in a second. All right. Harden your systems. All right. Do not cascade the same credentials across to every machine. Right? That's just this lateral movement. That's a really bad thing. Okay. Use GPOs. Group policy objects. And those are basically policies that you can apply to machines. Security policies. They're great for hardening things. I actually get to the point where I don't ever touch a machine. To make a configuration change, I go in, I apply a GPO, and on the next cycle for the GPO update in my environment, that's every 15 minutes. That's how long it takes to propagate in, whether that's a local firewall rule or tweaking something. GPOs have the capability of actually preventing settings from being changed on the physical machine. So even if the machine is compromised, those cannot be changed. And if they somehow figure out how to change it, it gets reverted back as soon as it's done, or as soon as the next cycle goes through.
How do you deal with machines that are not on the network? Everybody uses laptops, everybody's traveling.
Everybody's traveling. All right, so, yes. So GPOs are great. So you can actually put GPOs in offline mode. So you can take the same GPO that you would apply, you can export them into an offline mode, and you can apply them to a machine, even if they're not on a member of a domain, or even they're not connected to the domain. So you want to be able to update them on a regular basis. You still need the machine to call home every once in a while. Okay. As part of your management platform, consider using tools like Microsoft Security and Compliance Manager to measure your GPOs and your security settings against industry best practices. It's a free tool from Microsoft. It's great. It's a great starting point. You'll always want to do something more, but it's a good starting point for you. And patch. Patching is vitally important in the context of Active Directory. Yes, thank you. All right, I'll push forward faster. Don't forget to harden your GPOs as well, right? If your security policies are what's protecting your environment, make sure that you have versioning, version control, and that sort of thing. Hardened group membership. By default, Active Directory, and every member of every group is public to everybody in Active Directory. Consider removing authenticated users and self from every group that you don't need to expose. Okay, secure the communications. Right. Active Directory by default and all its communications are in the clear. Its authentication uses Kerberos tokens, but all of the authorization data is in the clear. By default, all of your RDP sessions use self-signed certs. Putting CAs in your environment will definitely help you deal with that from a group policy without manual intervention. All right, separate your user and your device certificate authorities. They have different attack profiles and different levels of privilege, so it's vitally important that they are not the same. And please, use an HSM or some sort of offline route for your master. That's vitally important. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So we were talking about how nothing gets to touch the heart and center. The goal of the game is this has no access from the outside world. You're going to have people coming in, untrusted services, untrusted users. Basically, the watchword here is untrusted. You do not trust anything or anybody trying to access Active Directory. So what you're going to do is set it up as a one-way communications flow wherever possible. Why? Because it's so much easier to manage something when you give yourself control rather than you give everybody else what they want and then you lose control. Because once, we all know the rule here, once you give it out, you cannot rein it back in. That's the problem. And then it will spawn. Because like that terrible shampoo commercial, she told two friends and they told two friends and so on, and pretty soon everybody knew what the admin password was. That's a sad reality. So we're going to talk about securing Active Directory from also, I do a lot of work with threat intel, from a threat intel perspective. One of the things that we really value is visibility. Can you see your network from end to end? What have you done to set yourself up for visibility? Visibility means you know who is using what, when. So yes, logging is essential. Who has the highest level of control and what can they do with that control? Who has the ability to generate user accounts? Who has the ability to set up domains? You need to be aware of that, and ideally, you are the person who is controlling that and administrating that. With this level of control, when something goes wrong, you can actually pinpoint it and handle the situation as opposed to being at a loss. You'll also be in a far better position because you can restore things and lock them down to secure them. Okay. All right. So one of the things that we're going to talk about is remote RDP. Everybody wants to connect remotely. That's a big problem, a big challenge. And so when we set up Active Directory, we go through RDG, which is the remote desktop gateway. That is your intermediary. You have to have intermediaries in this process that you govern through policy. Policy is often a dirty word in our world, but policy is essential in terms of setting up the processes to ensure the security and how things get done, and Active Directory offers you a lot of choices in terms of automating these processes and policies. You put them in place, it will run them for you, and you have your sentries at the gate. You are the gatekeeper. Active Directory can help you do that work, but you have to put it in place and you have to understand how it works. And nobody ever gets here. You, just you. If you keep that in mind, you're building security from the inside out, layer by layer, like Joe was explaining it earlier. Another tool that you can use is your network access control. So the network policy servers are a bridge, and those are the conduit through which all of our remote workforce, and it's a growing trend. We know this. We love to work from home. I love to work from home. We have to be able to enable that flexibility in business so we serve at the pleasure of business. How we can do this is by setting up things like VPNs. Okay, we'll do next. All right. We'll move on to the next level. Okay, so we're going to talk about federations. I wanted to talk about the United Federation of Planets, which is my favorite one, but that is not the talk for today. So Active Directory Federation Services allows you to have control over the untrusted entities, individuals, or services that want to gain access to your central repository. You can enable this, set it up, use policies to govern and control. Centralize, again, one place, all of the identities of the people who are coming in, because this is how you're going to control the forest through the trees. Is anybody here familiar with the term of LDAP? Yeah, okay. Again, this is something we need to use. We have to understand it better. It is a lightweight directory access protocol that runs above Active Directory so that we can search through all of that information. And it will help us with things like patching, identity management to a degree, the things we need to manage the information. But it is not in and of itself security. It is a tool, and understanding it in that way will help you to secure better.
Okay. So we talked about Active Directory, and we've talked about some of the things that you need to consider in securing it, but we haven't actually put any people in it yet. All right? And this is one of the things that we need to take into consideration last, right? You only want to bring in identities into Active Directory that you manage. Leverage, different classes of identities. You have your personal accounts, your privileged accounts, your functional accounts, your service accounts, and you want to make sure that you're controlling those in a secure manner. Leverage identity assurance practices, either NIST or the Canadian Identity Assurance and Credential Assurance practices to help you and deal with what is an identity and how to manage it. Have different identity managers for inside and outside. As vitally important, they have different attack profiles and services. Have a self-service password reset to reduce your footprint of what you have to deal with from a help desk perspective. But make sure that when you're building those things, you're doing it in a secure manner. Multi-factor authentication type resets. Just try to stay away from Q&A type questions unless you're willing to go as far as say, I don't know, what was the value of your last bank statement or something along those lines that's dynamic. Everything else is you can find on Facebook, right? Group management. That's another big topic. We need to, as an industry, move away from manually managing groups. Bring that information in via HR systems and those sort of things and try to build it and then build upon those to give better accuracy into who should have access to what services. Okay, privileged identity management. This is an art unto itself and a whole talk unto itself. I just wanted to skim over this very quickly. It is vitally important that you're managing your privileged accounts, whether this is just-in-time delivery from Microsoft, thank you, or something more advanced like CyberArk or some of the other things. make sure that you're making sure you're ensuring that the accounts are managed and changing regularly, and that will lower your attack profile. Strong authentication will not save you, and this is vitally important to understand. You know, using certificate-based management is not a full-blown replacement for actually doing proper security, because underneath it's the same token and the same hash. It's still vulnerable to pass-the-hash attacks, even when you do those sort of things. Okay, so wrapping it all up. There we go.
This is the big picture. There is a lot to manage when you're doing Active Directory. A lot of pieces are required. But the bottom line is you need to be that central point of control. Not everybody gets to be central, special snowflakes. You need to say no. There is no need for domain admin for everybody. So secure the forest through the trees, and you won't be prey for the wolves.
Thank you.